Welcome back. This time we're talking about Logan, the third solo Wolverine movie and the final film to showcase Hugh Jackman as the iconic X-Man. Now, there was a lot riding on this film. As I pointed out, it's the final film for Hugh Jackman as Wolverine before he hangs up his claws. It's probably the final film to have Patrick Stewart as Professor X. It also boasts director James Mangold, who gave us an actual good Wolverine movie in the film The Wolverine, helping us to forget X-Men Origins Wolverine, easily the worst X-Men film to date. And what did all of that get us? Well, pretty much one of the best X-Men films to date, and really one of the best films I've seen so far this year. Now, before I get into my review of the film itself, much has been made, of course, about the fact that this movie is rated R, following the coattails of last year's Deadpool. So yes, this movie is very, very rated R. This is a very hard R film for extremely bloody violence and a lot of adult language. I've seen several theater chains putting out ad campaigns warning parents not to take their children to see this movie. And let me add to that call. Do not take your children to see this movie. I saw it on a Thursday night preview showing, and there was a decent number of kids there. This is not a movie I can recommend in the least for children. Unless you don't mind them seeing people get decapitated and limbs cut off and disemboweled and everything else that you can imagine a character with sharp claws doing to people in the heat of battle. But with that PSA behind me, let's dive into this movie. I really don't want to say too much about the story. The trailers have done a pretty good job of not giving away much. But suffice to say that we are in the future. It's 2029, and Wolverine, Logan, is not in a very good place. It's very obvious throughout this movie that some bad things have happened to him and other members of the X-Men between the last time we saw any of them, which would be in the final scene of Days of Future Past, and this now date of 2029. Logan is spending his time getting money to support Professor Xavier and try to keep as low a profile as possible. His attempts to do this, however, are thwarted when a woman approaches him asking for help, specifically to help her and a young girl named Laura, played by Daphne Keane. There are men after them, and pretty soon Logan finds himself wrapped up in their problems. And again, that's really all I want to say about the movie. It's best going in as blind as possible and then just enjoying the experience of watching this movie, because there is a lot to enjoy about this movie. Now, with that being said, this is a very dark, gritty, personal story for Wolverine. Since leaving the theater, I've kind of gone back and forth. I love the movie, but I was wondering if this was really the movie that we wanted to send Wolverine off on. And honestly, I have to say, I do think this is a great send-off for Hugh Jackman's portrayal of Wolverine. You know, of course, with Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, the darker, more realistic, gritty portrayal of comic book characters became very popular. And since last year's Batman v Superman, it's become sort of a punchline. But I'd say that movie was dark and brooding just for the sake to be dark and brooding. This movie, yes, it's dark, it's brooding. It depicts a much older, beaten down version of the character that we've come to love. But this is also a character that has earned the opportunity to tell a story like this. It feels appropriate. I mean, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine has been part of our collective pop culture for 17 years, since the original X-Men film came out in 2000. I mean, I was about to become a sophomore in college when that movie came out. A lot has happened in 17 years, and throughout all of that time, we've had this character as part of our collective pop culture. And as such, again, I feel that this story, the way they told it, is earned by the fact that he has been such a part of us for so long. So while there will be some times where you can laugh and have some fun with it, it also is a very serious and personal story. And I've used the word personal several times. As a whole, this story is smaller than a lot of the X-Men films. The world itself is not about to end. This is a very personal story for Logan and Professor X and Laura. And as such, it works very, very well. The acting is phenomenal. This is Hugh Jackman's best film as Wolverine from an acting standpoint, and probably for Patrick Stewart as Professor X as well. This script asks a lot of both of these actors, and they deliver. Meanwhile, Daphne Keane is great as this sort of wild child, but there's, again, a more depth to her than there necessarily needed to have this story work. They really spent time rounding out these characters and not just relying on the fact, oh, we know Wolverine, we know Professor X. They dive deep into all of these characters so we feel for them as these events unfold. Now, as far as complaints, I really don't have much. Again, this is a very solid film, but I do have one issue plot-wise. And the villains as individual characters are pretty interesting. The lead villain is played by Boyd Holbrook. He's perfectly fine as a villain. He's not the best villain that I could imagine for this film, but he's suitable. But my real complaint with it is, and it's sort of a pet peeve of mine when it comes to storytelling, and that is when the villains are trying to, mop up their mistakes and trying to clean up things before they're found out for their nefarious deeds. And through the course of trying to clean up their mistakes, they make much, much, much more mess than if they had just left the little mess alone. And that does lead me into some of the other complaints I have. As I said, this is a very personal story, and as such, it works very well. But the kind of larger picture of what this world in which these characters are living in and the sort of circumstances around them are not really made terribly clear. And because it is such a personal story, it's not a huge issue, but when we have things that happen, especially with the villains and some of the things they do and some of the authority they have, it's not entirely clear on how much authority they have and where it derives from. But overall, this is an excellent film, easily one of the best X-Men films to date. From an acting standpoint, the best work that both Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart have given to this franchise, and definitely one that you should go see as long as you are capable of going to an R-rated film. So if you've seen Logan, what did you think about it? What did you think about the level of violence that it had? And what did you think about the performances and the story and some of the issues that I raised? As always, you can subscribe to my channel, check out some of my other reviews, and until next time, I'll see you at the movies.